Hi, everybody. I am Lily, and I am 18 years old. To be honest, Emma, my twin sister, has always been the most brilliant star in our family. Me also. I am the shadow, that additional bit that nobody particularly seems to notice. Emma was the favorite I discovered early on while growing up. She was the one who attracted all the compliments, the attention, and the love I so much needed. Emma bought a new dress, the kind you would find on a princess. If I had one, it was either handed down or on sale. Emma's straight A's would cause a party featuring cake and balloons. When I did, I would respond with a laid-back, "That's great, honey," as though my success were expected. One Christmas comes particularly clearly to me. Emma opened the newest iPad, while I opened a sweater too big and a pair of socks. Emma unwrapped. Though I sat there grinning and tried to hide it from her, the knot in my throat revealed another tale. When I inquired why, my mother just answered, "We assumed you wouldn't mind." Emma had always yearned for one. It transcended the presents as well. That was their conversational style concerning her. While my achievements were fortunate to garner a passing remark, my dad would shine when sharing Emma's ballet performances or her brilliance with anyone. Working just as hard, maybe harder, I hoped one day they would see me the way they had seen her. But whatever I did, it seemed as though I was not even in the running. I began to doubt if it would be even worth attempting by the time I turned 16. Emma took the front stage, and I embraced my part as the one barely visible. Still, a tiny bit of me continued clinging to hope for my own proving ability. I stayed late to study, dedicated everything to my academics, and pushed myself to be the greatest. It seemed like the only path I might at last be noticed. Senior year gave me the chance to shine. Applying to Columbia University, my ideal university, I had no hope I would actually be accepted. I was shocked when the acceptance letter arrived, bearing a full scholarship, not less. For once, I thought I had done something worth commemorating. I pictured my parents' proud faces, how they would at last view me as more than simply Emma's twin. That little happy moment did not linger. My heart thumping with excitement, I arrived home carrying the acceptance letter. But my parents hardly turned to face me as I passed through the door. Emma was seated at the table with them, their laptop open between them as they arranged her trip of graduation to Hawaii for graduation. I arrived in Columbia. With the letter held aloft, I said. My mother just glanced at it momentarily. "Oh, Lily, that's wonderful. Congratulations." Her tone was so laid back, as though she were remarking on the temperature. She turned back to Emma then. "So, sweetheart, when we're in Hawaii, do you think you would rather spend time on a cruise or stay at a resort?" Standing there transfixed, the letter crumpled slightly in my hand. They asked nothing, even to view it. They were far too preoccupied organizing Emma's party, a trip I was not invited to. Later, I tried to bring it up once more, considering perhaps they simply needed a reminder. "So, you are scheduled to visit Hawaii? Trying to keep my voice light?" I asked. My dad smiled and answered, "Oh, yes. Emma will find it really lovely. She has worked so hard. We wanted to treat her especially." "And me?" I asked gingerly. Mom cast me a perplexing glance. "You will be somewhat busy getting ready for Columbia. We assumed you wouldn't be open to staying home." Such was it. Not apologies or any recognition of how unfair it was. Simply a dismissal. My emotions had no bearing on this. I stayed awake in bed that evening, trying to make sense of everything by staring at the ceiling. Years of attempting to prove myself to them had gone toward nothing, but thinking that if I worked harder, accomplished more, they would at last see me. Now, though, I understood it made no difference what I did. I could win a Nobel Prize, and their behavior would still be more significant than my high school graduation. It wounded more than I would have wanted to admit. I truly wanted to be glad for Emma. I could not, however, ignore the mounting bitterness in my chest. How could they not find this to be lopsided? How could they not have seen me? I watched from the porch as they loaded the car with bags and beach equipment on the day of their trip. Emma gave me hugs and grinned like a small child on Christmas morning. "Remember to hydrate the plants while we're away," she chirped. Weakly smiling and waving as they drove away, I watched the tears begin to flow as soon as the car vanished down the road. I felt abandoned, that I was left behind emotionally as much as physically. I came to see I was really on my own for the first time in my life. My parents would not help me to feel seen or valued. I would have to locate this for myself. And for the first time, I questioned whether I wanted to keep battling for a position on their planet. Perhaps it was time to begin construction on my own. The week Emma and my parents were in Hawaii seemed hollow and freeing at different times. On the one hand, I avoided having to put up with their continual affection for her or deal with their contempt of me. Conversely, the emptiness of the house brought back memories of just how invisible I had grown in their life. Organizing things for my big move to Colombia helped me try to divert myself, but the pain of being passed over persisted no matter how hard I concentrated. My uncle Jack called me about midway during their journey. Jack is the oldest brother of my mother and a somewhat black sheep in our family. He has always been far off, not because he wanted to be, but more because my parents made it abundantly evident that he did not fit their perfect picture of the family. Jack stayed unmarried, had a little landscaping company, and lived in a comfortable house out in the country while my mom married my dad and created her ideal suburban existence. Jack had always appealed to me. When it came to me, my parents seemed to lack that which he seemed to have, genuine kindness. His rich, happy voice made me feel a little less isolated right away when I took up the phone. "Lily, how's it going, buddy?" he inquired. I stammered, not wanting to come out as negative. I said, "I'm okay. Just, preparing for school." "Ah, Colombia, right? That is astounding. You really must be over the moon." Listening to his pride almost made me cry. That was quite different from the meager response I had received from my parents. "Thanks, Uncle Jack," I murmured, my voice flickering slightly. Jack may have sensed something since he stopped to ask, "What's wrong?" "You sound unlike someone who recently enrolled in an Ivy League university." Once more I paused, but the words came out before I could stop them. I told him everything about Emma, the favoritism, the trip to Hawaii, and how nothing I ever did seemed sufficient for them. Jack listened silently as I let all the years' bottled up fury and hurt come out. He sighed deeply when I finally finished. "Lily, I'm sorry you have to deal with this," he added. "Your parents, well, let's just say they have always shown preferences. Though it's not fair or just, it does not mean you are bad." His comments served as a healing agent for my broken heart. Someone in my family was first recognizing what I had felt all along. After a minute, Jack said, "I have an idea. Why would you not come out here for a few days? Get a change of setting and clear your brain. It would be great if you could assist me with the garden as well." I paused. Though I would have loved to spend time with Jack, I worried about what my parents would say when they learned. Then I told myself that I should not care about their view, since they hadn't bothered enough to include me in their vacation schedule. "I would love to," I said. 2 days later, I was standing in Jack's driveway, fixated on his charming small house amid verdant surroundings. For the first time in weeks, the air smelt like wildflowers and new grass and calmed me. I laughed when Jack welcomed me with a big bear embrace and a tray of homemade cookies. Jack and I settled into a simple rhythm over the next several days. Our mornings were spent working in his garden, pulling weeds and planting flowers. Our afternoons were seated on his porch, drinking iced tea and chatting about everything under the sun. Though basic, it was just what I needed. Jack shocked me one afternoon. "Come with me," he urged, guiding me to his garage. Inside was a slick black BMW, the sort of vehicle fit for a film. "What do you propose?" Grinning, he said. Running my hand over the gleaming surface, I said, "It's gorgeous." Like he was offering me a cup of coffee, Jack added nonchalantly, "It's yours." Sure, I had misheard him. I blinked. "What then?" Leaning against the car, he said, "I have been saving for a while. Figured I'd get myself something decent. But then I thought, why not give it to someone who really deserves it? Lily, you have worked so very hard. You owe this." Tears welled up in my eyes as the truth of his gesture sank through. Nobody had ever done it for me before. It was not only the car. Jack believed in me enough to make such a big gesture. I said, "Thank you," choking back a tear. "Don't mention it," he said, dragging me into still another hug. "Just promise me you will use it to drive towards the future you deserve." A few days later, when my parents and Emma got back from Hawaii, they were startled to see the BMW in our driveway. Emma's jaw dropped, and as she asked, "Whose car is that?" my mother's eyes narrowed. "It's mine," I said, not elaborately. My dad scowled. "Where would you find the money for something like that?" Holding their stare, I said, Uncle Jack handed it to me. After everything I have gone through, he wanted me to have something beautiful. The room stopped, and I could see the incredulity and maybe a trace of guilt on their expressions. But Emma burst in before anyone could say anything. "That is not fair. Years of asking for a car have gone by." My mom turned to me, her voice sharp. "Lily, you ought to give Emma the automobile. More than you do. She needs it." Although the old me might have caved, not this time. "No," I responded with great conviction. "It's my car, and I'm keeping it." My dad's face darkened. "If you don't listen, maybe it's time you found somewhere else to live." I felt a pang of fear, but quickly pushed it aside. "Maybe I will," I said, meeting his glare. "And maybe that's the best thing for everyone." That night, I packed my things and left. Jack had already offered me a place to stay, and I knew I'd be happier with him than I'd ever been at home. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was in control of my own future, and I was not about to let anyone take that from me. The quiet at home was intolerable when my parents and Emma headed for Hawaii. It was not only silence in the house, it was the kind of emptiness that creeps into you and makes you feel tiny and lost. First, I tried to concentrate on the positives. The entire house to myself, free of continual comparison, no one overshadowing me. But the loneliness started sooner than I had anticipated. I chose to phone my Uncle Jack on one of those long, silent days. In the family, Uncle Jack had always been a somewhat black sheep. Though they hadn't spoken in years, he was the younger brother of my mother. Nobody ever completely understood the distance between them. Mom would periodically call him irresponsible or immature, but I always suspected this was because he didn't fit her picture-perfect story. Uncle Jack wasn't one to follow the rules, and that didn't fit her demand for control. Uncle Jack had always been nice to me, even with the family strife. The only person who seemed to see me struggle was him. He would throw me brief words of encouragement during family get-togethers. Though I hadn't seen him in years, I vividly remembered his saying, "You've got something special, kid. Let no one inform you differently." Feeling bewildered and not sure where else to turn, I decided to phone him. "Lilium! Hey there, kiddo," he said as he grabbed. Like the first sip of coffee on a chilly morning, his speech was friendly. Long time without conversation. Something is happening. Though I had not intended to let my guts fly, everything poured out. The years of feeling invisible, the way my parents always favored Emma, the trip to Hawaii, and how I was left behind after entering Colombia. As soon as I heard his voice, my voice cracked, and I realized I was weeping as well. Jack softly stated, "Lily, I'm so sorry you've had to deal with that." After a silence on the other end of the call, "Better is what you deserve. Listen, why not drop over for a little? I would really like to catch up." I turned back. Jack had always been regarded by his parents as some sort of careless misfit. Would going to him exacerbate things? Still, deep down, I knew I needed someone, anyone, who really cared. "Okay," I finally answered. Surrounded by huge trees and meandering gravel roads, Jack lived in a comfortable house on the outskirts of town. He hugged me bear style and showed me inside when I arrived. His house was not at all like the well-chosen suburban home of my parents. It was cozy, a little messy, and smelt faintly of coffee and wood smoke with mismatched furnishings. We engaged in hours of conversation. For the first time, I felt like someone really noticed me, not as Emma's twin or my parents' afterthought, but rather as my own person. Jack listened without interrupting, nodded, and offered the sporadic, "That's rough," or "I can't believe they did that." Jack remarked, "You know, your mom's been like this her whole life," when I ended our conversation, always striving to maintain appearances and constantly demanding control. That does not imply, however, you have to live in her shadow. Lily, you are free to be a unique person, and their loss is that they cannot see how wonderful you are. His comments really touched me more than I anticipated. I hadn't thought about what it could be like to give up entirely since I had been trying so long to get my parents approved. Jack stunned me before I left that evening. He said, "I have something for you," and headed me toward the garage. Parked under a dirty tarp, there sat a sleek black BMW. I felt my jaw drop. Jack grinned and continued, "This was my baby back in the day. Still, I hardly use it these days, though I intended to sell it." "Well, you might make more use of it than I could." Startled, I fixed my gaze on him. "Jack, I cannot handle this. It is excessive. He gave his head a shake. Lily, it's not about the car here. It's about demonstrating to you your value. Though I can see it, your parents might not. And one day you will also believe it. What to say was unknown to me. Nobody had ever done anything for me before anything like this. That evening, driving home, the car seemed to be more free than just a car. Freedom to create out my own personality. Freedom from the stifling demand for approval. That degree of independence, though, was fleeting. Emma's parents and mine were startled to find the car parked in the driveway when they arrived from Hawaii a few days later. Emma spoke first, her voice laden with incredulity. "Whose automobile is that?" Trying to keep my tone objective, I said, "It's mine." Emma grinned. "Your? Where in particular did you find it?" The room stopped when I mentioned Uncle Jack. The face of my mother clouded, her expression a mix of rage and something nearly like dread. "Has he handed you a car?" Her voice strained as she said, "Indeed," I said simply. Her jaw contracted. "Well, that isn't equitable. Emma has college and needs a car. You ought to give her that." Startled, I blinked. "What? No! I own this automobile." "Lily, don't be selfish," my dad said. "Emma would utilize it more practically. You have a complete scholarship. You do not need anything extra given to you." My hands came together in fists. "I am not handing her my automobile. Emma now has everything thanks to you. I am saving this. It is the one thing I have." The room turned into anarchy. Emma just stood there grinning like she had already won. My dad threatened to cut me off financially, and my mother claimed me to be unappreciative. I did not, however, back off. I held my ground for once. It was abundantly evident by the end of the debate that I could not be there anymore. That evening, I loaded a backpack and headed in with Uncle Jack. Turning to Emma as I left the door, I added, "Don't worry, I'll email you Columbia photos. Perhaps for once you could live vicariously through me." Though that wasn't my most grown-up moment, at last I could express my opinion. The first step toward recovering my life was moving in with Jack. I felt for the first time like Lily, not someone's twin, not someone's disappointment, that I had a chance to be me, and that was sufficient as well. I was ready when my parents and Emma returned from their ideal Hawaii vacation. I had been thinking about how they had handled me and how things ought to have been for a week. Now or never was the question. I could not keep acting as though everything was good or that I was okay. When they came through the door, they radiated. Emma was sporting that usual smile, the one that gave her the impression of knowing she possessed the world. Right there with her, my parents were discussing how great the trip had been. Not until they came across the car did they even glance my way. I had scheduled it. I wanted them to see it. My new automobile, the BMW Jack had given me when they arrived home. I had worked so very hard for this. I grabbed this moment. Though they had never bothered previously, I wanted them to know I was worth noting. But my mother's eyes closed as she fixed on the car, not praising me. Almost without interest, she questioned, "Where did you acquire that?" "It's mine," I said. "It is a gift from Uncle Jack." She was boiling beneath her cool front, I could tell. Not the gift itself, it was secondary. The fact that Lily, me, had acquired something Emma lacked was what counted. Ever the ideal daughter, Emma moved forward and said in that patronizing voice, "Wow, you really believe that having a nice car will offset all the attention you missed?" I kept her from reaching me. This time I wasn't going to let her control my emotions. I stared at her, icy, and replied, "It's not about the car. It's about at last being noticed and once recognized." My mother arched an eyebrow. "We hardly had an opportunity to honor your accomplishment. Lily, perhaps you ought to have asked for a party rather than a car." The years of irritation were rising up. "Mom, I asked for no party. I wanted thanks so you might really see me for once. You ignore me instead, though." Emma and you head to Hawaii. I'm left here. Once more, here. Though I did everything right, here we are. That was when my rage really got strong. Years of building had gone toward this quiet anger. I would not be silent going forward. "I'm finished, Mom. I am done trying to be good enough and get your attention. I'm about to depart." Up until then, my dad had remained silent. He then spoke, his voice flat. "Lily, you fail to grasp. You are not the only one living life. We can't just stop everything since you want people to notice. You are selfish." "Selfish?" I responded back. "No, I am acting honestly here. Treating me as if I don't matter wears me out. Always being the second choice wears me down. That was when my mother behaved as one could anticipate. She corrected me, saying I was wrong, that I was overdone, and that I was acting dramatically. Still, I had nothing wrong. I knew it right in my bones. Not thinking about what they said, I collected my belongings without more words. Though my heart thumping in my chest, I was determined. Turning my back, I told them, "I don't need your permission anymore. I'm departing." Emma quieted herself. She just fixed me with her false worry. Her eyes sunk on my rear as I turned to leave the house. But I turned around this time, not looking back. Though I knew I couldn't stay there, I had no clear idea where I was headed. I couldn't live in that house where I was always passed over. I headed to Jack's residence in my car. Only he had ever looked after me. He had never expected me to be anybody else than myself. I hardly had to explain when I knocked on his door. He murmured, "Lily," opening the door. "Come in here." What went wrong? I lost it in more recent times. I collapsed, spewing everything about my parents, about Emma, about how exhausted I was of being invisible. Jack merely listened. He listened only. He did not try to correct or interrupt, and for the first time in my life, I felt free from feeling obliged to apologies for my emotions. The next several days blurred together. Jack let me stay with him, and I attempted to make sense of all that had happened. I felt, for the first time, as though I could shape my life. I released the assumptions that had defined me for so long. One last thing, though, remained hanging in the air. What could happen next? Would I turn back? Would I ever be able to mend fences with my family? I am ignorant. I stopped waiting for them to call my fate. At last, I was making decisions for me. Sitting in Jack's living room that evening, I found myself thinking back on everything. I shivered, haunted the future, terrified of what I might be losing. Still, the anxiety was less than the relief I had at that same moment. I was not after their approval for once. I was not vying with Emma for attention. I could be Lily, exactly Lily. Perhaps also, just perhaps, it might be sufficient. Though I still had questions about everything, I was done being the second choice for everyone. I would be living my life on my own terms, going forward. I began searching for a part-time job the following morning and concentrated on my academics. I had obligations, and I was not going to allow anyone to drag me back into that stifling zone of invisibility. It was a fresh chapter, and I was eager to open it. After a few days of getting used to Jack's house, I honestly felt as though a weight had been taken off my shoulders. I could start breathing once more. All of it seems like it was a lifetime ago. The pressure from my parents and Emma, the ongoing sensation of inadequacy. Every morning at Columbia, I attended classes and dug into genuinely significant study sessions. I would go back to Jack's house in the afternoons, where the peace of his garden and the friendliness of his company made everything seem to be at last in order. Still, there were flaws in things. When my parents found I wasn't returning, their wrath changed to manipulation. Emma moved first, as she was never one to keep silent when she felt she had the upper hand. Starting modest, it grew. Messages from pals inquiring about what was happening would vibrate on my phone. One of them questioned, her text full of worry, "Is everything okay with your family?" Emma had gone on a social media frenzy, depicting me as the villain who had bolted in some dramatic fit. One post noted, "Lily's throwing a tantrum. She thinks she deserves everything, and now she's running away because she didn't get what she wanted." It wasn't just my pals. Numerous of my classmates, individuals who had no idea what the real issue was, shared her post. I read over the flood of alerts while keeping my phone face down. Though I was furious, I had discovered over the years that responding to Emma's pranks just gave her the attention she so much needed. I chose to follow the high road. Rather than answering, I turned my attention to what was really important: my education, employment, and future. That did not mark the end. Usually the more subdued manipulator, my mother started phoning me every several days. She rang once, and I responded, expecting a breakthrough, a change in her attitude. "Lily," she replied, her voice full of forced compassion. "I am quite concerned about you. You are seriously erasing a mistake. Emma looks up to you, and you are just deserting her. You know this." My blood boiled as I listened for the recognizable guilt trip strategy slinking in. "I'm not deserting anyone," I responded, my voice cool but forceful. "I only need room to sort things out, space I have not had in years." Long stillness before her speaking once more. You will regret it, though, if you maintain this. When all goes wrong, you will see how much you need us. I answered nothing, and she hung up, not surprised. The same old screenplay, the same old manipulation. Their behavior has always been this. Make me feel as though I was the one spoiling everything and guide me into compliance. But I would not be falling for it this time. Emma chose to intensify things the next week. Unannounced, she came up to Jack's house, standing on the doorstep with an attitude I could only characterize as a mix of rage and desperation. Lily, let the door open, she yelled across from the opposite side. I heard her voice while seated in the living room with Jack, sipping tea. I got tense listening to it. Jack just pointed toward the door. He was not bothered by family turmoil as usual. Would you want me to throw her out? He said. I held back. Some of me wanted to simply shut the door and forget about it. I understood, though, that avoiding confrontation was not going to go indefinitely. Rising, I said, I'll handle it. Emma's angry visage greeted me first when I opened the door. She moved by me silently, settling herself in Jack's small living room. She laughed. You've got to be kidding me, looking about the room as if it weren't good enough for her. This is the place you now choose to live. What are you doing here, Emma? I asked her without letting her tone influence me. She remarked, seated on the couch like she owned the house. I came to talk to you. I'm leaving since it's dumb not getting what I want. Mom and Dad are on edge. Every day they have been phoning me to find out what is happening with you. You are making everything worse. Sitting across from her, I inhaled deeply and then spoke. They made me not want to leave. I had to leave, Emma. I had to stop living in their shadow. Stop being treated as invisible. Act not as though I am the only one generating issues here. She wrinkled, obviously surprised by my candor. Lily, I am not the one that left. It is you that is behaving as though you are too good for us. You have always had to project everything about you. Though I did not react, the words were wounded. I knew better than to let Emma's attempts to set me off work. I'm not presenting myself as perfect everywhere. I'm working to at last act in my best interests. Not a top concern for anyone else in this family. Emma paused for a long time, staring at me, her face a mix of irritation and something that might have been guilt. She did not, however, express apologies. She never followed through. She got up instead, fixed her jacket, and cast one last glance at me. She remarked, hurrying out the door, This isn't over, you know? You'll regret this. I let out a breath I had not noticed I was holding. Dealing with her outbursts was draining, but I knew I had to keep my cool. Not these days. The ramifications from my choice occupied the next several weeks. My parents kept phoning, sending messages loaded with guilt and subtly expressed threats. Emma maintained her social media campaign and painted me as the villain in a narrative nobody else understood. I refused to let it, nevertheless, shake me. I realized, at last, that leaving was the proper decision. No matter how hard they tried to pull me back, I wouldn't be living the life I wanted. That felt more than enough since at last I was shaping a future entirely mine. Though not perfect, life with Uncle Jack was mine. I felt for the first time in years not like I was living in someone else's shadow. I possessed my own voice, my own independence, and my own place. Jack usually offers a word of advice but never pushes me. He made sure I had time to breathe. Only he had ever truly listened to me. No expectations, no judgment. The days went by, and I began to settle once more. Columbia was demanding, but it was a fresh start, a place where I was learning to accept who I was, flaws and all, not just Emma's twin or the overlooked one. Still, my newly discovered calm was fleeting. Jack asked me aside following supper a few weeks into the semester. His visage was austere, more austere than I had ever seen. Lily, I have to tell you something, he started. Startled by his tone, I turned from my homework. Your mom has been keeping something from you. Something large, Jack said ongoing. His voice was low, as though he feared someone may hear. Though my heart stopped beating, I had no idea what to expect. From me? What might my mum be hiding? You know how constantly fixated on appearances she has been? So controlling? It is not only that, though. Jack leaned in close and added, She has been hiding a family secret for years. I gasped hard. What secret? Jack hesitated, then started to talk. She has been trying to guard someone, from you, your father of birth. I froze. Father at birth? I know you have always believed your dad to be your dad, Jack said. Still, that is not the whole truth. Actually, he is not the man you have been told he is, and your mother has been concealing it from you, trying to make sure you never learn the truth. I sensed the ground underfoot changing. Was all I believed I knew about my family, about my past, a lie? Jack added, his voice lower now. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you this for a while, but Lily, you really ought to know. You have a right to the truth. I stood mute. My head found the words nonsensical. How might my mother conceal anything like this? How could she fabricate my father, my identity? Why did you wait to tell me? My voice quivered. I eventually asked. Jack muttered. Your mother is dangerous in terms of human control as she is. She never wants you to know the truth. She constantly feels that she should control everything. But you are entitled to know. You are strong enough to manage it. I had no idea how I should feel. Emotion, anger, uncertainty, betrayal, though unsure, I felt I had to learn more. I did all I could to probe the facts during the next 2 weeks. I located ancient family records, spoke with Jack's side of the family, and even got in touch with some distant cousins who might know about my birth father. I finally put together a narrative I never would have guessed. My mother's life had included someone significant. Hence, my biological father was not just some stranger who had vanished. Someone my mother never wanted to talk about once she liked a man. My head would not fit around it. My entire existence had been a well-crafted lie. And now I was surrounded with this new truth. Still, I experienced an unusual sense of relief among all this anarchy. I wasn't striving to fit into a box that wasn't mine, or live up to anyone's expectations for the first time. Now, Emma's twin, or the second choice, was more than just a reference point. I am Lily. My parents kept attempting to get to me, delivering messages growing more urgent. They pleaded with me to come home, to mend things, to join the family once more. I couldn't go back to that, though, not following events that had transpired. Emma sent a note one day. She apologized, but the kind of apology I required was not what she offered. She stated she hoped I would forgive her and apologized for our differences. Her comments, though, did not strike me the way I had anticipated. I feel less enraged now. I had no need for her clearance. I needed no one else's permission. I was creating a life for myself right now, one free from definition by the demands of my family. My mother visited Jack's place a few months later. Jack let her in even though I was home at the time. Though I was not terrified, I was intrigued to hear what she had to say. She was seated in the living room, looking as put together and polished as always when I returned. She looked as though she had changed nothing at all, her voice icy. I know you're angry, Lily, she said, but you just do not comprehend. I carried out what I felt to be best. I kept him away from you. You have no idea what his nature was like. I stopped her from calling it quits. My voice firm, I said, I don't need your protection anymore. I am not the same person I was a year ago. I am not your puppet either. I watched a flutter of uncertainty in her eyes for the first time. Still, it was pointless. Now I was not seeking her approval. I felt weight off my shoulders as she went. Still terrible, the truth had set me free, and at last I could be me. The road ahead proved not to be simple. There would be difficulties, and there would always be bits of my past I would have to cope with, but I was not terrified. First in my life, right now, I had a fresh life to shape, and that was all I had ever required.